So what are some signs you've seen in a team organization that maybe vision is lacking or has been lost? And a second part of that, if after you tell me what the signs are, how do you get back to casting or creating that vision?
Beautiful. So if vision isn't clear or has been lost, usually there's no anchoring to a why. So there'll be a listless or a purposelessness to the activity, which generally means there's waning motivation to do it. And it may not be they don't do it, but you just have people going through the motions, right? And you can feel it, right? They're doing it, but they're just going through the motions. It's not tied to something. When somebody has purpose or they have vision, there's like a pep in their step. There's like a intention to what they're doing. They are able to visualize and see where they're going, and that shows up in their direction and the momentum and energy behind what they're doing. So it's generally pretty obvious. Sometimes it's a lack of vision, sometimes it's a plateau, and sometimes it's just an ebb and flow. Knowing the difference is really important and how you address it. So a plateau happens because we stopped growing, we overexerted ourselves, or we're lacking information, we're lacking something, something's missing. And so those are generally your three reasons for plateaus. You stopped growing, you're exhausted, you've pushed yourself to a level of exertion that is, you just need to recover, or there's a part of the equation that is missing. Anybody who spent any time in the gym usually can recognize that, because you plateau in the gym too, and you usually have to do things to change it up, right? So maybe as an example of growth, maybe you've been in the gym for a long time, you do the same sets, do the same kinds of workouts, you get to a certain level. But no matter what you do, you can't seem to get past that level. Aiden, what do you do when you're in that scenario? Change it up. Change up your workouts. Change out either the cadence or the order of your workouts, or maybe completely different workouts. So you're challenging your body in a different way. That keeps it growing. Because your body and mind is always trying to work towards homeostasis, which is sometimes annoying because that may be working against your own intention. Well, growth doesn't happen there. So it's constantly, in a sense, you're always fighting against that internal design. By the way, the design is genius on multiple levels. It's not meant to be a negative. You just need to understand that's its internal design, right? Toward the equilibrium. So you're constantly having to push that, and it constantly wants to equalize. For those who've understood the idea of reaping and sowing or karma, that's exactly what it is. It's just energy rebalancing. And so if you understand that, it's like, okay, well then if I want to continue to grow, I have to constantly push that lever so that every time I go back to balance, I push it out again. Go back to balance, I push it out again. It's one of the reasons we get stuck in a plateau. So those are I'd start looking at that. Well, which one is it? Ebb and flow, by the way, well, what is ebb and flow? Everything has a season. Every biological system on Earth has a season. It's designed that way. So sometimes fighting against an ebb is not materially worth it. Fighting against an ebb, as an example, for those who swam in the ocean or surf, it would be like when the tide's coming in or the surf is coming in and you're fighting trying to go out, right? If you just wait for a second, it'll switch and go back out, and now you ride the flow back out. Does this make sense? So there's times in our lives where there's an ebb and flow, and we fight into that ebb and exert. Like if anybody's ever been in a riptide or swum in the ocean, the first thing they tell you is what? Don't fight the current, don't fight the riptide. That's your ebb. Let it go and catch the flow back in. Now, ebbs and flows aren't 90 days. 90 days is a season. So if you're like, oh, I'm just in an ebb, I'm like, no, that might be a day where you just need to recover. But if you're in a 90-day season, that's not likely an ebb. There's something else going on there. Make sense? But understanding ebbs and flows are really important. Why does this matter? Let's say your team just had a phenomenal week. Best week it's ever had. And then 8 or 9 days into this phenomenal day, we see a meaningful dip. We'll say a 20% dip. An immature coach or leader may begin to chastise or whip the team for dropping 20%. Somebody who's been in this game a long time may go, just an ebb. They're recovering. We've been on a savage run. So instead of whipping people or pushing people there, you may change it up. Oh, we'll play a game tomorrow. We'll have some fun. We'll relax a little bit. Now, you got to know your season, because that may be the opposite thing, depending on what's causing that dramatic dip. That may be the opposite of what you need to do, which is why being a good coach is important. It's understanding what is going on in the team dynamic that's leading to that lack of production. And a lot of times it's just, we just need to have some fun. Let's chill out. We've been kicking ass for a long time. So it's pretty funny. At Phoenix for a very long time, we would play Jeopardy on Mondays. And that became such a thing, and it happened for so long that copies thought, well, that's just what we do. We play games on Monday. not realizing the reason we played games on Monday is because in the beginning it was every week we are number one, we will play Jeopardy on Monday. Well, we were number one for like 3.5 years or 4 years straight. And so over copies, the reason why we played Jeopardy got lost. It was just we played Jeopardy on Mondays. Does that make sense? And then one day I was like, we haven't been number one for like a year. We're not playing Jeopardy anymore. They were like, what? It had lost its purpose. That was part of balancing out the ebb and flow, as an example. Needing to know kind of what is causing the lack of vision, right? Or is it a lack of vision? And sometimes it's not. And the reason that's important is because if you challenge somebody that it isn't the lack of vision, why they are in a lower energy state, they may get discouraged and feel like, one, they're not doing enough or their vision isn't strong enough, when in fact it is. They're just in an ebb or they're in a plateau. That's important because if you misassign that, you could unintentionally induce somebody to do something that works against what they're trying to do out of an impatience of thinking they're not solving for what they actually should be. Going a little bit deeper, but hopefully this sits with everybody. Clarity of vision. You create clarity of vision within the organization by having a clarity of vision about what you're about. That's where it all starts. And then you talk about it over and 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 over again. And if the natural question to that is, well, how do I know I've talked about it enough? When you were sick and tired of hearing yourself talk about the same thing, you were probably halfway there, meaning there's almost no chance you're going to be able to over communicate. Just make sure the way you're communicating it doesn't become robotic or rote or dispassionate. Does everybody get it? So it's like every time you share your vision, share it as if it was the first time you shared it. I love doing that because I get motivated. And if you're doing it right, every time you're sharing it, you're motivating you. I love unpacking our business and why it's built the way it is. Whether or not anybody in the room gets it, I remind myself of how great it is that I get to do what I do. So I'm almost like indifferent to whether or not somebody else gets it. It's mostly I'm excited because it reminds me of why I'm doing what I'm doing, which is important. That's having a locked in vision. Good question.
We're talking about creating momentum and maintaining. What would you say is something for a newer office or office in general to advance your momentum?
Well, you may not like my answer. By continuing to maintain your momentum. Advancing momentum is a fruit of maintaining your momentum for such a long time that it takes on a life of its own. Because advancing momentum really is the expression of maintaining your momentum, but not just with you, throughout your organization. You'll get to a certain level in ownership where it's not really relevant to go to the field anymore. I'm hopefully at a level of the game where it's not really relevant for me to run an office anymore. And I was very conscious about when that happened, when I felt like there was enough great examples that I could point to that I no longer needed to do that. Then you get to a point where it isn't really a benefit to do it. Make sense? But you get there by maintaining momentum long enough that it starts to push into advancing momentum. Well, the day after day is a lot of practice of saying the same things over and over and over again. Again, those have been around for a long time. If you really extrapolate the basis, values, and principles of my messages, they're basically the same thing, just said hopefully lots of different ways and hopefully creative and entertaining enough that people hear it. As the strategy behind that, I focus on just-in-time information versus just-in-case for the most part. So just-in-time is information that can immediately apply to the group. Just-in-case information would be information that may be useful, but just in case. So the split there is usually 80-20. 80% of the information I want to hit in just in time, 20% of the information just in case. I use the acronym KDF when kind of shaping my message. What do I want them to know? What do I want them to do? How do I want them to feel? That helps me create the tone and cadence for how I'm speaking. And then especially within the business, I want to look at real numbers for the basis of my content. So where a lot of guys go wrong is they use feeling to decide what they want to talk about. I just feel like the guys need this right now, right? So I'll say something like, well, how do you know the guys need this right now? Well, I was talking to Billy Bob New Guy and he was struggling with this. Like, bro, you have 30 guys in your office and you're basing your entire message off Billy Bob New Guy? Hey, I want to talk about this in leaders meeting. Why? Well, I had a leader come to me today and they're Billy Bob New Guys dealing with this. So I thought I'd talk about that. Well, you may be right. You also have a very good chance of being wrong because you're basing it on one dude, one person in the office. Now, if you only have one purpose in the office, fair play. But if you've got a big office, you've got lots of people in the office, basing the entire message off the experience of one guy may be off base. So what does that mean? Even if they may tip you off to something, go back and look at the numbers. Do the numbers tell you this is something we need to deal with right now, right? So leader says, Billy Bob New Guy is having a hard time with this, blah, 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 blah. Then I go back and I look and I go, yeah, we haven't promoted a leader in 6 weeks. Oh, maybe there is something here we need to address. But see how I'm looking at real data to back up that person's story or perception before I act on it? This is crucial with dealing with people, because when people come to you with their stories, they're generally convincing and emotional, which will make you think, oh my God, this needs to be addressed with everyone. When in fact, in many cases, it may just be addressed with that one single person, which would be better fit for a one-on-one than in front of everyone. And you'll know that's the message when you hear something and you're like, I feel like this was for one person and everyone else just sat here and listened. By the way, sometimes there is a reason to do that, but if you're doing it instinctually or not consciously, you're probably going to miss the mark more often than not.